Hi guys, my name is Pavel Litensky and I will show you now 51 tips how you can boost your productivity while developing software in IntelliJ IDEA. Increasing my development productivity is my big hobby, so I hope you will enjoy these tips as me when I learn them. So let's dive into them. All tips are divided into 4 categories: reading the code, debugging, programming, and tools and plugin tips. Also, in presentation I am using 2 icons, telling you what kind of tip is it. Tool icon is for essential tips that every developer should know. I'm using tips marked by tool icon on a daily basis and I cannot imagine working without them. Anyway, and based on my experience, every developer, including you, may find some essential tips that he or she is not aware of yet. Cherry cake icon is for tips that you will probably don't know, even if you are using IDEA for years. So especially if you are experienced developer, pay extra attention to these cherry tips. First, let's start with reading the code tips. Why are these reading tips so good to learn? Based on some study, we spend 10 times more time reading and navigating the code rather than writing the code. So mastering, browsing the code and searching through it helps a lot. Tip number 1, last edit location. Let's say that I will edit the file owner here. I will add some to do and then I move away from it to browse or study other codes and then I forget where I was editing. I don't know the name of the file and I want to fast get to the place. So I hit Ctrl+Shift+Backspace, which just jumps straight away to the last edit location. You can also notice that here at the bottom of the screen is displayed what command I issued and what keyboard shortcut I have pressed, which helps you to know what I am doing in the IDE. Tip number 2, file structure. File structure shows me what methods or fields are inside the class. So when I press the shortcut, I can see the black methods, which are straight away in the class, and gray methods, which are in the parent class. I want to go straight away into the method. I can also start typing and filter the methods by some text. Here I see just the process methods or methods that contain process in the name. The file structure surprisingly works also for XML files or other files that has a structure and IntelliJ IDEA understands it, which is sometimes very handy. Tip number 3, declaration and usages. Can be used when you want to see the declaration of the method and if pressed twice, what is using or calling the method. So let's see it in action. Imagine I want to see who is calling the save method. So I press Ctrl+B. First I go to the declaration and if I press it twice for the second time, I can see who is calling it. I can either click on the occurrence to see the method, or if I want to study all the callers of my save method, I can hit this icon which fetches the results into the search result window, which is quite handy. In some cases I want to skip the declaration part and I want to just see the callers of the method. In this case I am not using declaration and usages command, but call hierarchy, which is Ctrl+Alt+H, which fetches all the callers of my method into the hierarchy window. If there is some call tree, I can explore it also by expanding the nodes in the hierarchy window. Tip number 4, type hierarchy, can be used if I want to see what are ancestors of my class. So for example here, I want to see ancestors of owner class, so I go to owner label and press Ctrl+H. And I see that owner is extending person, which is extending base entity, and I can open the classes by double clicking them. Another quite handy tip is backwards and forward. These shortcuts are moving in the code to the place which you last visited, rather than a last edit location which came to the place where you last edited the code. So if I'm pressing it here, it is just moving in the history of my positions in the source code. Our last non-sherry tip in navigation section is quick documentation. This basically shows Javadoc of the given source code element. So let's have a look. If I go to save and press Ctrl Q, I can see the Javadoc how it is written. Before I knew this shortcut, I always Ctrl clicked the method and I was reading the Javadoc straight away in the source code. However, this is much safer, and also it works with the links that may be inside the Javadoc, and I don't see any curly brackets or another syntax of Javadocs in a plain text. Surprisingly, quick documentation works not only in classes, but also, for example, in Docker Compose file. So, for example, if I open my Docker Compose and I want to learn more about the image tag, I can press Ctrl Q and I can read what is it about. You can experiment yourself in other file types, and I believe IDEA will give you hints whenever it is available with some documentation. And voila, we are getting to the first sherry tip. Navigate to test subject. Navigate to test subject is handy if you want to quickly move from the class to the test of this class. And since approximately 50% of the time we are writing tests rather than the production code, this is very handy. So I will just press Ctrl-Shift-T, and IDEA doesn't exactly know which test I am interested about, but I will choose owner test as it is obvious. When I want to go back to the tested class, I press Ctrl-Shift-T again and I'm back in the class. Before I knew this shortcut, I always was, for example, searching for the class using open file dialog like owner test, but it is much slower than using the navigate, or rather navigate open class, not open files. You may have already noticed that I'm a big fan of keyboard shortcuts, preferring them to clicking with mouse. This is because I know that if you keep using shortcuts long enough, your brain will master the motion of your fingers and fully automates it. At first, when we are learning the shortcuts, we must memorize and think about the keys we need to press to perform given action. But later on, we just think of an action and our hands are auto-pressing the needed keys without us even knowing which keys they were. And this happens in a glimpse of time much faster than if we attempt to locate some button and click it with mouse. The motion automation happens in a similar way as when a skilled musician performs on a musical instrument. So I invite you to be programming musicians. Sherry tip number 2 is next highlighted error. Next highlighted error is handy if you are reviewing the code and you want to browse all the errors in the file, in the class, which were spotted by the IDE. If you are using some linters like ESLint or SonarLint, the errors discovered by these linters will become part of the error group or error list you can browse as well. So if I press F2, it shows me that we have declared in Javadoc parameter name, but it's missing, which is obvious error. If you press if you press Shift F2, you just jump back to the errors, so you can browse all the errors in the file. Sherry number 3, jump to navigation bar, can be used if you want to quickly open, for example, the neighbor of the class you are in. So I have owner here and I would like to owner pet. So if I press Alt Home, I can select one of the neighbors, which means classes which are in the same package as my opened file. Alternatively, I can synchronize the project tree window with my opened file, which is also okay, but this enables me to have the project view closed and move quickly between the neighbor files, neighbor classes in the same package. I can also go to left and right and, for example, choose different package and different class in the parent packages, which is handy. This was all about reading the code navigation, and now let's see what are the tips about opening files. I'm sure you all know shortcuts to open class or open file, which is Ctrl-N, Ctrl-Shift-N. However, you may not know that you can use CamelCase and star notation in the open dialog. So let's see what I mean. Imagine that you want to open Pet Clinic app. So here you press Ctrl-N, and obviously you can type the whole name, Pet Clinic application. However, you can also use just CamelCase. So Pet Clinic application. And you see that the file is found as well. If there were more classes that have these camel cases in it, you can help it by providing extra letters, and you will filter out the result. Common use case which I'm using while developing Spring Boot applications is that I search for controller using a star mask. So when I press star controller, I can see all the controllers that are in my project. What you probably are already using is find in files command, which performs a full text search in a given directory or given project files. What is very nice is defining scope when searching for something. So for example, if I want to search for a pet, I can limit the search only to production files, which means that it will ignore all the test files. Similarly, I can search, for example, only to project test files. There are more scopes here, so it is worth looking what every possible scope IDEA offers, because there is a big chance that you don't know it and it can be handy for you. You can also notice that I am looking for a pet because this project I'm using to show you the tips is Spring Pet Clinic. So I am looking for some pet animal, but when I search for a pet like this, you see that, for example, if I see it in project, it finds word perpetual, which is not a pet. It is just a substring in the word perpetual. I can help to define the search by clicking the words icon, which limits the results only if pet is found as a full word, as a word pet. So perpetual is no longer shown in the results, which is great. Regarding the scope, you can also define your own scope by clicking the three dots icon and clicking the plus button. So you can, for example, choose some directories that you often want to search in and create your own scope and name it somehow. Share tip number 1 regarding opening files, mnemonic bookmarks. Based on my own survey, only just 1/5 of the developers are using them. However, they are great. So let's see what it is about. Often when you work on a project which is long term, you tend to go back again and again to the same files because there are some places which you edit or view more often. In my case, it's usually build Gradle. So if I open build Gradle now, I can place mnemonic bookmark by pressing Ctrl F11 and hitting some key. I choose the key that is easy to remember for me to the given location. So this is build Gradle, so I could either choose B for build or G for Gradle. For me it's more logical G for Gradle. Now if I close the file, and whenever I want to go back to build Gradle, I just hit Shift F11 and G. And in some time it is fully automated. My hands do the motion without me knowing what the hands are doing. I just imagine I want to work in build Gradle and my hands are pressing Shift F11 plus G. I'm using this approach also to place which I'm currently working on. So for example, I am assigned a task for 1 week to work on process creation form method, and I know that I will be often editing just this place. So I assign a shortcut W, which stands in my mind for work in progress. And whenever I want to go back to the method, which is my current assignment, I just press Shift F11 W. And when I work on another assignment, it will be just a different place, but same shortcut. And of course, in different projects, in different microservices, I can have the W specified as well. So let's see at cherry tip number 2, files in preview search result. Imagine that we want to search for a pet word, but we want to limit the search only to one of the entity classes, which means that the class will have atEntity keyword in its content. Okay, so how can we do it? Ideally, we would like to do something like that. We search for pet, and in the text should be atEntity. However, this search is not possible in a single search, and we cannot also limit the search using file mask, because there is no pattern in our entity classes for the name. So what we can do, we first search for the pet in the project using the whole word flag, and you see we have like 116 occurrences, which is far too many to browse and look into. And in the second search, we choose the scope files in preview search result, and now we search for entity. This way we can perform the end query and full text query, and you see only pet and owner classes are matching our search criteria, which means these are the classes that are both entities and also contain the pet keyword. Cherry tip number 3 is open recent projects. This is handy if you have a lot of projects in your open recent project list. Unfortunately, you cannot search in this list by typing some keys, some substring that would limit the number of projects shown. However, even though you cannot do it from the menu, if you run the command using double shift run action command, so I double shift and type here recent projects in actions, open recent projects. So the window looks a little bit different, and now if I, for example, want to find my xpost microservice, I can type it in here. You can also assign shortcut to this open recent project. I will show you how. So if I find the action first, so I can here hit Alt Enter and assigned to it some shortcut. For example, Control Alt Shift O, like open project. And now when I want to open some recent project, I will just press it and I can start typing the name of the project, which was impossible in the open recent menu item. So let's explore debugging tips. First one to explore is evaluate expression. I am sure that most of you already know evaluate expression window. So just briefly remind, when we stop at some breakpoint, we can evaluate code in evaluate expression window. So I will debug my test. I have placed breakpoint in the getPet method, and I will hit Alt F8 when I'm at the breakpoint to show evaluate expression window. Now I can type some expression and see what it returns. For example, I can type pet and hit Alt V, which is shortcut to click on this evaluate button to evaluate the expression. So I see that at the moment the pet is max. I can call some methods on it, like pet get type, which returns doc. And I can also study some expression from the source code. For example, if I want to see what returns this expression, so I will copy paste it into my evaluate window and I will hit Alt V again. I see that this returned max, so I can study why this is, for example, not working if I'm fixing some bug. I can also copy paste the whole for each cycle, and I will return the result here. So I see that the calculation just returned Phoebe as a pet from this fourth cycle. I am using evaluate expression window also if I need to write new code and I have a test that is testing this new code, but for example the test is a long running test, so it takes few tenths of seconds or even minutes to run the test. It may be Spring Boot test or some integration test, so it takes some time to rerun the test. So instead of keeping improving the code until the test passes, which requires multiple running of the test, I can just run the test once, put a breakpoint here, and write the code in the evaluate expression window and keep evaluating it until it matches the needs of the test or matches the needs of the implementation I am supposed to write. You can do everything. You can even write the code that was not present in the original class, and this way you can tailor your implementation and save time on repeatable reruns of the test, which may be slow. Debugging in evaluate, as known as list trick, is a tip which kinds of simulate debugging inside the evaluate window. So imagine that for some reason you would like to study the individual steps which happen in the for each cycle. If you have the for each cycle here in the code, so you can just keep pressing F8 and stepping over and over inside the cycle and study what happens. But if you are writing the new code, as I mentioned just earlier, a little bit earlier, you can no longer debug the steps inside the cycle. So you can do the list trick. You defined a new variable which I can call, for example, A as new array list, and then you return, instead of result, you return this A. And the debugging steps you are interested in, you just will add to the list inside your evaluate expression window. So for example, first I will add the get pets because I want to see what I am iterating, and then for example I can add the comp name, and then I can add the result of this expression. I can also add for better overview some string like next iteration, and this kind of helps me to see what is happening. So I see that I'm iterating 2 pets, that I have 2 iterations, and for comp name max, it calculated this expression as max. For Phoebe, it calculated it in EB. So I kind of simulated debugging inside the evaluate expression window. One extra tip, which is not mentioned in the slides, is conditional debugging. If you right click the breakpoint, you can type here some condition. For example, pet.getName equals max. And this means that this breakpoint will be ignored unless the condition is returned as true. This is invaluable. This is just very useful when the iteration iterates through hundreds of items and you are interested into only single iteration. So for example, if you know the ID of the pet you want to debug, or its name, or you can somehow differentiate the iteration from others, you can specify the condition for the breakpoint and it will stop there only in the iteration you want to debug, which is perfect. Debugging cherry tip number 1 is drop frame. Imagine that you want to study the iteration when name is max. So I rerun the test again, or redebug, and it stops in the iteration when pet is max. And instead of looking what happens and studying the code, I accidentally hit F8 and I enter the new iteration, when pet is Phoebe. But I wanted to study the max iteration because it contained perhaps some bug. So I have 2 options. Either I redebug the whole test, which can take a few seconds extra, or I can use drop frame button, which is here. Drop frame throws away the local stack of the currently debugged method and returns in the stack trace at the caller method. In our case, it's getPet. So now I can again hit F9 to debug further, and you see I enter the same method as I was before again from scratch, and here the pet is again max and I can see what happened to the max. This saved me already so many times a lot of time when I was debugging and I was too eager in pressing F8 and I just skipped over the iteration I was interested in. Now we come to debug node.js app cherry tip number 2. This is very kind of hidden or cryptical or magical tip or magical feature which is inside IntelliJ IDEA, which allows you to easily debug Node.js applications. When I first learned about it, I thought it's probably some joke and it will never work, but let's have a look how it works, and it really works. And it's really handy as well. So I will open now some Node.js application, and in terminal I will start npm start which starts the node.js application and allows us to use local host address to open it in the browser. So you see it automatically opened the browser, and I have a breakpoint here, and I would like, when I'm testing it in the browser, my application, I would like this breakpoint to be hit. So let's see what happens. I will add some new task from do the dishes. But as you see, nothing happened. The breakpoint was not triggered. However, in the output console of the npm start task, I can see the URL address of my localhost. So if I press Ctrl Shift and click on this address, new browser window will be opened, and do the dishes too. And when I hit the button, I can debug the Node.js application which I'm running in the browser. And you see here is the dishes text I have written into the field, and I can just regularly debug as usual, which I find very cool. Last tip is debugging remotely. Sometimes, for example, if you are using continuous integration, it may happen that your tests are working and passing locally, but on continuous integration server are failing. So there is a little what you can do to investigate, but one powerful way is to debug remotely what is happening on your continuous integration server, presuming you can have SSH access to it, and you can start a Java process in the debugging mode with the debugging options. Then you just create some SSH tunnel using similar command like this, and you are basically forwarding anything what is happening on the port at the remote machine of your continuous integration server. In this case it is 5005 to your local machine, and on your local machine in your local IDEA you can just debug this application. Of course, it doesn't need to be continuous integration server. It can be also some installation on your dev environment where you are just running in the debug mode some application, and you want to see what is happening there, because for example on your local machine it's working, but it's behaving strange when deployed to the dev environment. You probably will not use this in the production environment though. So what are the tips for writing new code? Let's start with easy one, live templates. Live templates are handy to fast write some code that is often very common. So for example, one of them is sout, which is console output. So I type sout and then I press tab key, and it will just write down the code. Another one could be psvm, which is a template for public static void main. The one I'm using probably the most is iter. Iter, based on the context of the source code where I am just now, will generate the for each iteration. So for example here, because in my code it was collection of pets, iter was smart enough to generate me for a loop for the pets. Nice one is also lazy. So for example here, if I type lazy and tab, it will output the code like this. If something is null, just create a new instance of it, which is a common concept in the programming. I recommend to study other templates that are predefined in IntelliJ IDEA. So I press Ctrl Alt S to get into settings, and here I search for leaf templates. I look for, you see that there is a lot of languages supported, so I look for Java, and I see that there is just a lot of leaf templates that could be handy to get familiar with. The one that is missing here is logger, which I usually add myself. It is the logger get logger, and you provide the class which you are in, which is used for logging. Common thing. Essential tip number 2 is generate. It means generate code via keyboard shortcut Alt Insert. So for example, here most likely you know generate getter and setter. Those of you who are using Kotlin no longer need this because of the Kotlin features. Very handy so is, for example, override methods. You can override methods of your superclasses or of your interfaces. And what I really like is generate test. So for example, I can hit the test menu item and I can choose what framework I want to use. For example, Spock is my favorite one, or JUnit, and I can click which method I want to test. And then the rest is done by the IDE. Sometimes I'm using also generate equals and hash code for the entities that are, for example, keys for the hash map. Essential tip number 3 is surround with. It is very simple yet very powerful and useful. For example, imagine that you want to cover this block of code into try catch. So you could either type it yourself and write all the necessary curly brackets, or you just select the block of code, press the Ctrl Alt E or your surround with shortcut, and you choose try catch. And you see it's properly embedded into try catch code. What is nice is that it also understands the exceptions that may be thrown inside the block. So for example, if I type here .parse double x and do the same again, IDEA just chose the proper exception type in the catch block. Other handy surround with expressions are, for example, if else or if alone, which just saves a little bit of your programming time. I'm also using surround with tag in XML file, so I select some XML content which I want to be part of some parent element which I want to add, and by selecting surround with tag I can add, for example, extra div and put the selected elements inside this div fast. I am a big fan of test-driven development. That's why I really like show context actions, which are executed by Alt-Enter, because it is possible to generate non-existing class, method or parameter using this action. So let's see it in action. Imagine that I have my test, owner test, and I will add a new test for a new method that is not yet implemented. In my case, it will be method happiness. And it will be method on the class owner. So now I will think about the API of the new method in the test. So let's say that I know that my method should return some integer representing the level of happiness and will be on the owner class. And parameter will be the pet name of the pet. So in my case, Max. I will extract this string into pet name variable. And as you see, get happiness is still red because it doesn't exist yet. But now I can use the context actions, Alt Enter, and create the method in the owner class. And you see the skeleton of the method, including the proper signature, was automatically generated without me typing a single character, which I really like because I'm focusing on typing the test and auto-generating the production code. For example, I can add also some other parameter to the method if needed. And in very similar way as I auto-generated the method itself, I can auto-generate the extra parameter when. This way I am defining the interface of the production code in a test, and I'm not typing the code myself, but letting the auto-generate using context action to fill it in. And cherry tip number 1 tells us that we can generate code using Alt Enter not only for non-existing code, which is underlined by red, but also to something that already exists. In our case, it will be new constructor parameter. So for example, if I here add new parameter like birth date into constructor, I can use Alt Enter and choose create field for parameter birth date. And it creates a new field in my owner class and assigns it inside this constructor, which is sometimes handy compared to writing it on your own everything. Cherry tip number 2, generate test, I have already mentioned. So let's move on to the text editor tips. We will start with delete line, move lines up and down, and duplicate line. There is no default shortcut for delete line, so you can press Ctrl+Shift+A like search all actions and type there delete line. Or you can abuse cut command, which is associated with Ctrl+X keyboard shortcut, because even if you don't have the whole line selected, if you press Ctrl+X, it cuts the whole line. As a side effect, it goes to the clipboard, but it does the job in the editor too. Move lines up is moving the single line or selected block of code up or down. There is another variation of this command, which is move statement up or down. This is moving the whole statement up and down, and it's Ctrl+Shift+ up and down. You see that also the annotations are moving up and down. Let's see also what duplicate does. If you select some statements by pressing Ctrl+D, it just duplicates the selected text. Did you know that there is a multiple clipboard feature in IntelliJ IDEA? Cherry tip number 1 is about it, so let's see how it works. You just press Ctrl+Shift+V and you can choose from the previously copy-pasted text to be pasted now. You can also paste more items at once if you press Shift and select multiple rows here. So sometimes if you want to pick up multiple text which you want to paste at once, so you just multiple times copy it, and you know it's stored in the multi-clipboard, and then at once you paste it in the desired place. Share tip number 2 is handy if you want to have distraction-free focus on single file in the editor. It basically does the same thing as if you double-click the file header, but using keyboard shortcut Ctrl-Shift-F12. So it hides all the tool windows and sidebars and leaves you just with the single file open. Column editing is a really cool feature, and if you learn it, I believe you will love it, because it feels like pure magic. Imagine that here I would like to type something like if birthday doesn't equal null, assign it to the field. However, I would like to do it for all 4 fields here. So I can use column editing, and by pressing Ctrl-Alt-Shift I can drag and drop with my mouse, and it makes the cursor blinking on all 4 lines. And now I can start typing if, and obviously I cannot type here birth date because I want this text to be different on each line. So I can now press end, which jumps to the end, and press arrow left and Ctrl-Shift select the text. Select single word to the left to my cursor. Now I press Ctrl-C and back again with home, and now I can paste whatever I put into the clipboard. And I can finish my statement. So far so good column editing, but imagine that I would like to at once make all these strings uppercase. So obviously I cannot do it the normal way, because I am selecting all the lines, also the empty lines between. So here comes to place handy command select all occurrences. So what I do first is that I press Ctrl F and search for something that is common to the lines I want to edit. So you see that I search for column and it's highlighted in yellow. And now I can press the button select all occurrences. Ctrl-Alt-Shift-J is the shortcut. And it selects them as if I selected them in the multi-column editing mode. And now I can do the same. I press end, I press twice left arrow, and then Ctrl-Shift left arrow, I select the text I want to change. And now I just go edit and toggle case. Voila, and it's changed to uppercase. Nice, isn't it? So let's move now to refactoring tips. 2 first essential tips: introduce method and introduce variable. You probably know very good and you are using them on a daily basis, so I will not be showing them in the IDE. Maybe you don't know introduce constant, so let's see how we can do it. I will move to owner controller, and here let's say that I want this owner to become a constant. So I will select it and refactor it using Ctrl-Alt-C into new constant. I will call the constant owner key, and here I'm asked if I want to replace all occurrences of it. Of course I won't, because I want the string to disappear from the code and appear only in the constant. So as you see, the constant was generated and it was properly replaced wherever the string was previously hard-coded. Essential tip number 4 is introduce parameter. This command or action allows to extract local variable as a new method parameter. So for example, here I have the local variable page size and I want to make from it parameter. So I press Ctrl Alt P and press enter, and it is made as a new parameter, and all the calls of this method are now calling it with the value that was present there before. So in this case it's 5. So what are the cherry tips for refactoring? First one is pull members up. You probably will not use it very often on a daily basis, but still sometimes it can be handy. You use it when you want to pull some fields or methods from a class to its parent. So here, for example, I want to pull city to the parent class, which is person. So I will choose refactor, pull members up. The city is pre-selected because I had my cursor on the field, and I can choose to which class it should be pulled, and I click refactor. From the field it becomes protected field in person, and my owner entity just inherits it now. Sometimes you may use extract superclass. For example, you notice that in all your tests you keep repeating mock MVC, test owner ID, and perhaps also other fields or methods. So you would like to create abstract test class and move some stuff into it to be reused by other tests, which will be extending this abstract class. So you choose refactor, extract superclass, you choose whatever should be in the parent class. So in my case, I choose 3 fields and 2 methods, and I name my class abstract controller class, or abstract control tests. And as you see, no, I don't want this. As you see, now my test class is extending the abstract class, and the fields were moved to this class as I wanted. In a similar way, you can use extract interface. So for example, I would like my owner class to implement new interface pet owner. So I will choose refactor, extract interface. I will name the interface pet owner, and I will select all the getPet methods which I want to be part of the interface. And as you see, my class now implements the pet owner, and my getPet methods have now annotation at override, because they are overriding the interface, and I can move straight away to the newly generated interface pet owner. Because it is so easy to generate new interface, I also recommend don't creating interface if you have only single implementation, because it is just complicating your code. You need to have the signatures of the methods twice, first in the implementation and again in the interface, and there is just no need to have the interface in the first place. If there is a need in the future, which is not guaranteed, because you will have need for 2 implementations of the interface, you can easily generate the interface from one of the classes as shown just now. So there is nothing you can gain by first creating the interface, just in case it will be used in future when you need to add another implementation. We will finish now with last group of tips about tools and plugins. During coding, it is essential to use some linters. Linters are tools or plugins that are statically analyzing your code for bugs and code smells. While SonarLint can analyze many languages like Java, Python, HTML, or Kotlin, ESLint is for JavaScript and TypeScript only. SonarLint can be installed as plugin into IntelliJ IDEA, and ESLint is plugin enabled in IDEA by default, however only in Ultimate Edition. Let's see how great help can linter be to your development experience and development results. I will now click the SonarLint tab, and here I found 4 issues in owner.java file. So for example, remove this unused birth date right fit field, which is not a bug, but it's definitely code smell because this field is defined and never used. What is perfect on this tool is that it also shows explanation of the given code smell or given bug. So you can read why this is wrong or why you should fix it or remove it. And also it contains code examples of non-compliant and compliant solution. This way you can learn about issues that you were not even aware about, and you can study it in a full detail. This way the linters are educating you and improving your programming skills by a big deal. Sherry tip number 1 is a tool that helps you to analyze stack trace. Let's say that you have collected log text from some log file. This may look like something like this. So you just copy paste it and choose code, analyze stack trace or thread dump. It automatically takes the text from the clipboard, so you just hit OK. And here you can see the stack trace which is clickable, so you can fast get to the place where the exception occurred without searching it in some more slow ways. Enter presentation mode command can be handy if you are presenting the content of your IDE using projector to the wall. You just choose from a menu, view, appearance, enter presentation mode. It makes the text bigger, and also it will close anything else that is not needed to show the content of your file. Also, what can help you with presenting something that you have in your IDE is Presentation Assistant. It is a plugin which is showing the pressed keyboard shortcut together with the command in the bottom of the screen. So now I leave the appearance presentation mode, and whenever I press some command, for example Ctrl B as go to declaration and usages, you can see it here at the bottom. What is a really nice tip from my colleague is a key promoter plugin. This plugin helps you to memorize and automate usage of keyboard shortcuts. So that it works properly, it must be installed and enabled in the plugins section. If it is properly set up, whenever you use your mouse to do some action, for example here I click the commit button, it will tell you how many times you missed a keyboard shortcut. For example, here it is telling me that I am tending to use mouse instead of keyboard, and I should use Ctrl-K instead of clicking the commit button, which is really handy to help you in a fast way memorize and automate new shortcuts. This way I relearned myself to the original IntelliJ shortcut mappings, because for a long years I was using my Eclipse mapping. Using this promoter plugin, it took me less than 1 month to automate new set of keyboard shortcuts. But without it, it would be nearly impossible to do it in an efficient way. Sherry tip number 5 is string manipulation plugin. This allows you to do nearly every operation which you can imagine on the strings. So, for example, let's see that I have some password. Strong password. And I want to make a base 64 hash out of it. So, or I want to encode it to base 64. So I choose string manipulation, encode to base 64. And it turns the text into base 64 form. Of course, I can decode this back again to normal string. There is a lot of other possibilities which you can do with the string manipulation plugin, so it is again worth to browse them. You can shuffle, reverse, you can filter them. Nearly everything which you would write some routine to perform some operation with the string will be present in the string manipulation plugin. If you are using Teamcity integration server, for you is our very last tip. It is about integration of IntelliJ IDEA and Teamcity server. It works in a way that you just have some Teamcity build with failing tests. You open it in a browser, and by clicking this tiny arrow icon and failing test, you can choose Open in IDE. It magically opens your failing test in the window in your IDE. Of course, you need to have first this project open. In my case, it's exposed. And here you can see the stack trace of the failure, and you can straight away click the stack trace to get to the place of the failure. So this can be handy to fast investigate the failing tests just in place in your IntelliJ IDEA. So these were all tips from me. Thank you for watching. Also, please feel free to share this video using this bit.ly/productivity in IDEA link. If you have your own productivity tips, I will be glad if you add them into the comment section under this video, so that we as a developer community can learn from each other, which is always great. Also, if you learned something useful, give this video your like. And at the very end, I have a small recommendation for you. If you can, go and try now the tips you liked, to get familiar with them in your IDEA. This way, it is the biggest chance that you get familiar with them and you will be using them in the days to follow. So I wish you happy coding.